As a member of the Judiciary Committee, a lot of my bills surround the issue of law enforcement. And as we come here to protect our constituents, sometimes we try to protect those that protect us, so our law enforcement. So my questions really are directed at a lot of issues that they have brought up and issues that I would like to just get do you support changes in the law to do certain things? And some of them, I know some of them are not the nitty-gritty details, but the general concept of. And one of the issues, one question I have first is, do you have data on the arrests for medical marijuana, the amount statewide that people have been cited for DUI with medical marijuana?
I don't.
Okay.
That may be a question that PennDOT could answer for you, but we don't do traffic stops. We don't have that data.
I didn't know if that was something that just because it was an offense necessarily associated with one of our laws, if that was data that you had. So maybe PennDOT, you're saying, might
perhaps
gather.
Yeah.
Okay. Secondly, the issue that we have with our law enforcement and some of the frustration that our municipals have had is the issue that they can't, if somebody says that they have a medical marijuana card, they can't check that. There's no way for them to go back like they do for a license or registration or any of that type of information using JNet or any of those types. So my understanding is that JNet, because of the law that we passed, JNet and the medical marijuana information is not linked up. So my question to you is, would you support changing that to give that information into the JNet system as to who legally has a medical marijuana card to allow our municipal officers to have that information?
I think that's a good question. I'd want to think about that a little more. I mean,
Okay.
just because one has, I'm thinking aloud, which is always dangerous
That's fine.
in these settings, but just because one has a medical marijuana card, it doesn't then give them a license to drive.
Well,
right?
and that's the second part of that, as to the DUI Act part of it.
Yeah. I'd want to think about that, and I'd welcome
Okay.
the opportunity to work with you or the committee on that. It's not really what we do in our office. We don't do traffic stops.
Right.
I think there's others in law enforcement that we'd want to have around the table, but I'm happy to visit with you on that.
And a lot of it comes back to in just reading your budget report and everything else, and how much you have the task force with the locals, with your agents, and understanding that law and working with drug enforcement. And one of the issues that came up and training them how to better enforce the law.
Yeah.
One of the frustrations that they have, and I had put out their information to have a bill really to start the dialogue, because the locals were having difficulty because by Schedule 1 with the federal state law, as soon as they stop somebody, they should arrest them immediately. But yet they show a card and they're kind of caught between the rock and a hard place of, it's illegal, they need to arrest this individual for being impaired, but yet the medical marijuana card. So they're having a very hard time with that issue. So that's why the statistics, I was curious if we had them, how many have been, and I've talked to our DAs and that type of thing, trying to get some of this information. So
Yeah.
that's why I kind of bring it to you as well. So.
If I could just quickly
Yeah.
follow, I mean, if you've got a card and you can legally purchase medicinal marijuana and you drive impaired, I'm not sure that that's much different than legally being able to consume alcohol, but then
Right.
driving impaired from that. I don't think one gives you a license to do the other.
It does not, but yeah, the ability is that if when the time frame as to when they used it in the testing and that type, so that's where we're getting some clash.
Happy to work with you on that.
Thank you. And to that same kind of issue with the drugs and issues of Narcan. One of the issues that we had dealt with our local folks, as well as time and time again, we are fighting the opioid crisis, as has been stated many times. The issue of Narcan and reviving somebody, doable, want that to happen, want our first responders to have that. The problem comes is when the person and the first responder responds 2 and 3 times to the same household in the same weekend. And their frustration, the DA's frustration, is the issue of, we passed the issue of the Good Samaritan Law, and you were here when we did that, and it's good intentions. Should we be looking at the ability to give them more authority to have them, the person that they've revived 3 times, not have the safety of that Good Samaritan Law and be able to, be responsible and they did something illegal?
Again, I've said many times here, I'm a law enforcer, not a lawmaker. I would just point out from a law enforcement perspective, the goal of the Good Samaritan Law was admirable, and I think by and large works. I do think that we need to further explore what happens when someone has been revived multiple times, taxing local law enforcement, taxing first responders, and not then getting them into a pathway to treatment. You know, we have the ability to commit someone for mental health purposes for a short period of time. Law enforcement, first responders do not have the same authority to do that when it comes to, I'm using the word commit in sort of air quotes, commit someone into treatment. That may be something that this body wishes to explore. And if you do, we'd be happy to talk with you about that.
Okay, thank you very much. I think there's a lot of criminal justice reforms that we need to be doing out there, not only to give our law enforcement the tools, but also to be working with those in the system. So thank you very much.